networks is
Mhm.
hierarchies leverage the intelligence of the elite few. And along with that, they amplify all their unconscious biases without any ability to correct for them. Networks, on the other hand, leverage the collective intelligence of entire teams.
Mhm.
And collective intelligence, it turns out, is a higher form of human intelligence.
Mhm.
That's the title of the book. Nobody is smarter than everybody.
Digital Audio Health by Simatrax.
I'd like to welcome to the show Rod Collins, author of Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody: Why Self-Managed Teams Make Better Decisions and Deliver Extraordinary Results. Welcome back to the show, Rod.
Thanks, Rhonda. It's great to be with you again.
Yes, it's wonderful to catch up before the show as well. So, can you let the audience know about your book? And I'm really curious about the title. And so, if you can just let us know how you ended up with that title.
Sure. Nobody is smarter than everybody is the design principle between an alternative management model, which is known as the peer-to-peer network model. And this is in contrast to the usual top-down hierarchical model, whose design principle is trust authority. And I think as we look around the world today, especially over the past couple of years, there's less and less trust and authority than there once was. And I think that the idea of creating organizations around the principle, nobody is smarter than everybody, is actually a better design principle. And it's the reason that this peer-to-peer network organization makes better decisions. And so I guess our audience may be skeptical because most of us only know about the top-down hierarchical model.
Mhm.
Most of us only know about organizations where there are bosses. And what I write about is I focus in particular on three organizations that have been around for decades. They're all market leaders, all doing well, and none of them have ever had a boss in any time of their existence.
Mm,
And this just blows people's mind. They can't imagine how could things possibly get done if nobody's in charge.
right.
Well, it turns out things get done better if there's nobody in charge. And so let me begin with a little story. It's a story that I tell in the book, but it's something I think our entire audience can relate to. And I'll lead with a question. Why don't we have airplane crashes anymore? When I began as a traveling employee in the 1970s, every time I got on a plane, I consciously thought, I hope I'm not on one of the 3 or 4 crashes that will happen this year, because that's what we averaged. But all of a sudden in the 1980s, those crashes just disappeared. Most of us can't think of the last time we had a plane crash in North America.
Mhm.
You just would have to stretch your mind way back. And there's a reason for that. And the reason goes back to December 1978. The flight involved was United 173. It happened to be a very beautiful day in the continental United States. And this was a plane that was going from New York to Portland at a scheduled stopover in Denver. Everything was proceeding on time. They arrived in Denver fine, exchanged passengers. And as they were on approach into Portland, Oregon, when the co-pilot who was flying the plane asked for the landing gear down, when the captain lowered the gear, one of the 3 lights didn't line up, which meant they weren't sure whether or not the right landing gear was locked or not. And so they went and asked permission to go into a holding pattern. And the captain just myopically focused on how can we determine whether or not the landing gear is down. And he just focused all his time on that. He spent time talking with United Maintenance in San Francisco. And after approximately 50 minutes, determined that, well, we're just going to have a rough landing. He spent time talking to the flight attendants, making sure that the passengers were prepared. And some hour and 6 minutes after the problem presented itself, he told the tower, "We expect to land in 5 minutes." Well, he no sooner finished that communication when one by one, all 4 engines on the DC-8 plane shut down. The plane had run out of gas, and they crash landed into 2 vacant houses and a patch of trees. Now, fortunately, because they did run out of fuel, only 10 of the 189 souls on board perished, one of whom was one of the 3 pilots on the flight crew. When the NTSB team, National Transportation Safety Board team, began working on this, they were puzzled by a question. How is it that 3 highly trained, highly intelligent pilots can make such a senseless error as running out of fuel? It just made no sense to them until they listened to the cockpit tape. And then it became clear to them what the problem was. You see, the management model in the cockpit, and it had been that way for decades, was top-down command and control. The captain was in charge. The captain was not to be challenged. As a matter of fact, it was said at the time there were 2 rules for the cockpit. Number 1, the captain is always right. And number 2, if the captain is wrong, see rule number 1. And as the NTSB team listened to the tape, it was clear to them that the co-pilots were concerned about the fuel, but they were very deferential to the captain. They were making insinuations about it, and he simply wasn't hearing them. And what they're astonished at is, why didn't one of these 2 crew members who knew they were running into a fuel problem say, "Captain, we're running out of fuel. We need to land this plane now."
Mm-hmm.
And they realized the reason was because of the top-down command and control model. And so they made a very interesting recommendation. They recommended that all airline crews be retrained and stop using the top-down command and control model and adapt a peer-to-peer network model similar to something that was used in NASA. Now, NASA is dealing with great unknowns, and they couldn't afford the top-down hierarchical model, which is why they learned this peer-to-peer network structure. Well, the FAA was a little slow to put it in place, but United Airlines was not. Because you see, the crash of United Flight 173 was not an isolated incident. It was the 3rd United crash in a short period of time, all due to this command and control management model. And so the crews were taught that anybody can speak up, anybody can challenge anybody. The captain is not a dictator. The captain is a facilitator, and they train them when a crisis happens, you immediately go into a team mode, and you get involved in team decision-making. And this is why we don't have airplane crashes anymore, because all the information that's in the cockpit now gets used in the midst of the crises. The problem with top-down command and control is many times there are people with information who are told to keep their mouths shut. It's not a very good practice when businesses are trying to manage in a world that has been redefined by rapid change. This is why teams make better decisions than individuals, because one of the things that happens is, by having the ability for people to push back against the captain in the case of the cockpit, it meant that the captain's unconscious biases or myopic thinking would not doom the flight.
Incredible. I had no idea that's what was going on.
Yeah. They've been using the peer-to-peer network model in the cockpit for 4 decades now. It's just, now it's just within the DNA of flight.
Yes. And there were so many plane crashes, and until you brought that to my attention, I didn't realize how many there hasn't been. And as you're saying, in decades, and probably the audience is thinking this too. And so how can we transfer what happened in the cockpit to a corporate model? Does it work there?
Yes, it does. And we've seen 2 flavors of it. Okay. The first flavor is companies that were born this way. And so let me use an example from one of the three I write about in the book is a company called Buurtzorg. They are a Belgian company and they are in home healthcare nursing, which is an important part of the Belgian healthcare system. And a gentleman by the name of Joost de Blok was working as a home healthcare nurse in a traditional organization. And he felt that there would be a better way for the home healthcare nurses to do their work. He noticed that in the command and control structure that they had, that people were more or less treated as things. And so, for example, in setting up what nurses would be visiting what patients, well, for cost effectiveness, Nurse Nancy might be there on Monday, Nurse John on Wednesday, and Nurse Sally on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought, what if I start my own healthcare nursing company? We work in the context of teams. The teams will be responsible for handling all elements of the operations, and there will be no designated boss of the team. The teams will all self-manage themselves and decide how they operate. Well, when the teams did that, Nurse Nancy saw the same patient on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Nurse John saw a different patient, but the same Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And something interesting happened. The cost of home healthcare nursing dropped by a third because people were getting better faster. Good human treatment can lead to better results.
Oh, yes.
Another interesting thing happened. This was a startup that was a small company. Well, as word went around as how this company operated, today, Buurtzorg employs 70% of the home healthcare nurses in Belgium because they all gravitated to this company because of its unique management model. The second type, and this has happened in several traditional organizations, is, and I think a good example of this is what happened at Ford when Alan Mulally came in. Alan Mulally practiced a form of network management, and it helped turn Ford around in a very short period of time. Alan Mulally before that was with Boeing, when Boeing had better days, and he used this management model there now. But in each instance, when Alan left, the traditional top-down management model came back in because they didn't change the overall model. They just changed the practice during the tenure of these leaders. And there have been several instances of leaders who had responsibility for an entire business unit who put this model in, but they were part of a larger organization that remained hierarchical. So it can be done inside hierarchies, but unless you kill the lever that drives command and control management, which is the authority for people to make unilateral decisions and the authority for them to coerce others, then the peer-to-peer network model won't be permanent. The reason it's permanent in Buurtzorg is they were born that way. And so there's, as when de Blok moves on, because he set the company up this way, it's likely that this will continue.
Yes, and it just gives so much, the word that comes to mind is power to the person at the top. And with that power, their employees, don't seem to produce as well when they are concerned about mistakes and how they may be reprimanded for that.
And you hit on something really, really important, because the most significant change that happens between a top-down hierarchy and a peer-to-peer network, or the most significant difference might be a better way to look at it, is in the top-down hierarchy, the exercise of power is coercive. Bosses have the legitimate authority to command people to do what they otherwise might not choose to do.
Mhm.
And if they disobey, they can lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Even if that disobedience means they see something right. This is why these two co-pilots are so
Yes.
reticent in United. They don't want to lose their jobs. Unfortunately, for one of them, the fear of not losing his job cost him his life, literally.
Boy.
And now in the peer-to-peer network, power is a function of a very different attribute. It's synergistic power. And
Mhm.
so everyone gets to participate in the power. And it's in the hierarchies, power is about power over, whereas in networks, power is about power with. And power with creates a more powerful organization than power over, because all information winds up being processed. So the organization becomes more intelligent. It also means there are no powerless people inside networks.
Mhm.
We always hear about, roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of people are disengaged at work. We keep hearing this statistic over and over
Mhm.
again.
Yes.
Well, isn't it interesting? About 2/3 to 3/4 of people are not managers. Might there be a correlation? The reason they're not engaged is they feel they're powerless. Inside a network, nobody feels powerless because everybody is entitled to speak up. And that's important in a rapidly changing world because you want high information flow, because high information flow creates the better intelligence. And you're more likely to keep people in your organization because nobody's going to leave when they feel powerful.
Mhm.
So it transforms how power works. I think this is what happened in Birdsar.
Mhm.
Why did 70% of Belgians' home healthcare nurses go over there? Because I have an opportunity to work in an organization where my voice matters. I can make a difference, and we actually can do the work better.
Right.
And given that choice, or I can go work for somebody whose main interest is I do what I'm told, regardless of what I think. You can
Mhm.
begin to understand why people gravitated and moved in that direction.
Yeah, and I imagine that the boardroom meetings are different too, because everyone has a voice. You could actually get into sort of a mastermind where people can be creative, and the company bottom line is probably going to increase, and sick days are going to decrease.
Mhm.
Have they
Well,
seen that?
you
Hmm.
hit another important term, creative. Okay.
Yeah.
Top-down hierarchies are not creative. As a matter of fact, they're designed to kill innovation
Hmm.
because they want to maintain the status quo of the product they have. So let me tell another story, okay? And
Love
this
it.
story is this. The biggest name in entertainment today should be Blockbuster,
Hmm.
not Netflix. Why? Well, go back a few years when Blockbuster was king, okay? It had 6,000 retail stores all over North America, was on the verge of going on to the Fortune 500. The CEO had maybe about an hour meeting with these two co-founders of a startup who were fledgling and in trouble. They were $50 million in debt, and they wanted to sell their company to Blockbuster and volunteered to build a streaming service that would be called Blockbuster.com. Because at the time they thought streaming would be the future of home entertainment. All right. Well, the CEO laughed at them and said, streaming will never impact our business. We're a $6 billion juggernaut. We're the number one, we're the big gorilla in the market. No way this is going to have any impact on us. I would be nuts to buy you for $50 million. As I mentioned, Blockbuster was worth $6 billion on that day. Well, those two co-founders happened, their little startup was a company called Netflix. So Netflix offered to sell itself a Blockbuster. Now, because this one CEO had the legitimate authority to unilaterally make this decision, laugh at these two guys and kick them out of the office, he passed up a 50-fold growth opportunity because Netflix would manage to survive and become not a $6 billion company, but a $300 billion company. And this is important because what was that CEO locked into? I'm not going to do anything to damage this incredibly powerful product model we have.
Mhm.
Now, in the 20th century, that's good thinking because product models could last 30 to 40 years.
Yes.
Okay. Today, product models last maybe 5 to 7 years. I mean, I was on a podcast yesterday and I was asked, what is the biggest thing that worries you about businesses today? And I said, oh, what's the biggest danger they face? And probably a better way to put it. And I said, the ability to survive past their current product model. You see, somebody's going to put it out of business.
Yes.
And why not them? You see, if that CEO said, you know, I'm going to buy you guys, we'll make the $50 million investment, go build blockbuster.com. Blockbuster would be what Netflix is today.
Mhm.
And look at Netflix. They use this network model to some extent. They're not perfect, but they're good enough in this model because they're not sending DVDs to your home anymore. That was their original product model. Now they did build that streaming company and then they got into production and they keep evolving and they keep changing because they recognize they're in the home entertainment business. Whereas the CEO of Blockbuster didn't see himself in the home entertainment business, he saw himself in the DVD delivery business. And so getting the business right is important and it needs to be larger than the product. Networks can innovate because there are no powerless people. A team of people can get together and decide to build the product that will kill the current product that you've got. And you
Mhm.
want that to happen because that product will die. And wouldn't you rather die to yourself than die to someone else? Because dying to yourself means you get to live on. And this new
Mhm.
team, as it creates your next generation, guarantees the continuation of the firm. Every company has got to be designed for innovation because if you don't have the capacity for innovation, you will last only as long as your current product model.
Mhm. So it's best that everyone's on board with it instead of being afraid to open their mouth like the pilot was.
Yeah. And this fear that nothing will get done if nobody's in charge, it's the complete opposite.
Mhm.
Nothing gets
More
done when
gets
there
done.
are people in charge.
Mhm.
Look how long it takes to run information up and down a chain of command. Somebody can bring an idea to a boss who says, let me think about that, thinks about it for 2 weeks, then goes and talks to his boss, and maybe 3 weeks before they get a meeting to talk about that. And this just goes on for months and nothing gets done. Whereas if a team has responsibility, they have to decide quickly whether or not we're going to do this thing or toss it aside. Does it add value or does it not? And they will actually come to faster decisions, but they will also come to better decisions because the team process means they can correct for any unconscious biases that any of them have in a way that is non-confrontational. It just becomes a matter of course of discussion.
Mhm.
If somebody says, oh, I think this, well, have you thought about that? Oh, that's a good point. I didn't see that. And you can begin to see the different elements of information flowing together. That's what happens in cockpits today. The captain
Mhm.
says, I think we should do this. And the co-pilot say, well, are you really sure? Maybe we should think about that. Oh, let's put together this idea with this idea. That's what you want to be doing. Innovation is putting unusual ideas together and coming up with something neither one of us could think of.
Mhm.
That's actually a faster process for decision making. It also cuts down on rework. Why do we have rework? Because important information wasn't built into the decision before it was made. And after the decision was made and we're trying to actualize it and put it into production, we discover a problem we didn't know we didn't know. One of the nice things about conversations and networks is as people go back and forth and they exchange ideas and they see things that they didn't see before, or they see things that none of them could have seen except by getting their information together, it becomes a pathway for light bulbs going off saying, oh, we didn't know what we didn't know, but now that we know it, we can build for it before we've done any work. And so the amount of rework can go down.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. I mean, you get a group of people together and you inspire with your question, you inspire others to think differently. And then you come up with something you never even could have dreamt up on your own. And so what's happened is that the idea of being challenged has disappeared in the peer-to-peer. You don't feel
Yes.
challenged when somebody says,
Yeah.
this question or that, and there's a lot of businesses out there that are still top down, and the person in charge does feel challenged if you disagree with their decision or whatever is going on.
And they always feel they have to be right. Another big difference between
Control.
hierarchies and networks is hierarchies leverage the intelligence of the elite few. And along with that, they amplify all their unconscious biases without any ability to correct for them. Networks, on the other hand, leverage the collective intelligence of entire teams. And collective intelligence, it turns out, is a higher form of human intelligence. That's the title of the book. Nobody is smarter than everybody. And several years ago, there was what I consider a timeless book written called The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki. And he identified the 4 attributes that you have to have in order to access collective intelligence. And if you're missing any one of them, you can't access it. The first one is diversity of opinion. You have to welcome all points of view, even disagreeable ones. That's in contrast to the uniformity of thought that top-down hierarchies drive. The second thing he identified is people have to be free to do independent thinking without fear of retaliation. The third thing is you need local knowledge, people who are actually close to processes, close to customers, close to the situation.
Yes.
Sometimes people at the top are not.
No.
And the fourth thing is you need an aggregation mechanism, some ability and some mechanism in which you can bring together all the thinking into a holistic whole that works. When I applied these in my own business career, I had created a format I called the Collective Intelligence Workshop because we discovered this powerful tool. And when I read Surowiecki's book, I realized why it worked. Because we would invite about 40, 50 people into a room. We had a microcosm of the business. And we welcomed diversity of opinion, and we brought in people with different thinking, and we brought in people we thought who even had wrong thinking.
Yes.
And we're very, and we found out that a lot of times we think have wrong thinking, have some kernels of truth that are really important, and you got to cull those out. And the meetings were designed so everybody was free to speak their mind, no fear of retaliation. And because it was a microcosm of the business, we had people with local knowledge in the same meeting with the same voice as people who are at high levels. And we used dot voting to get a sense of where the room was, and that was our aggregation mechanism. And I realized why that works so well. Well, those types of conversations don't typically happen inside corporations. But when I had the opportunity to be the chief executive of a business unit inside a larger traditional organization, we grew from a $6 billion enterprise to a $19 billion enterprise because we learned how to leverage collective intelligence. And once a company knows how to do this, this is an incredible competitive advantage because you can think smarter, faster, and more powerful than the competition. And this is the advantage peer-to-peer networks have. So the two big things is their ability to innovate and their ability to rapidly leverage collective intelligence is what makes them smarter and faster.
And what happened to the company when you left? Did they go back to the old model?
The company it's grown since then. As far as I left them about 17 years ago, but I believe they continue to operate under the command and control.
Oh, okay. So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I had the opportunity to, over a course of 10 years, to implement this model. And when I left, I spent about a year wanting to understand why is it what we did worked?
Okay.
Because the particular business arrangement I was in was actually an alliance of 39 separate companies. And we had the insight, we better learn how to lead a network. We lead it like it's a hierarchy. And we had been suffering about 2 decades of low growth, low performance. And so we were able to turn it around once we developed some skills that are necessary to lead a network. But a lot of it was done, on a practical basis, trial and error. We'll try this, we'll see if this works, and the things that worked, we kept. But I wanted to understand why. And that's when I came across James Surowiecki's book after I left. And I also came across and discovered there were companies that were just built this way that I didn't know about, that there are actually companies out there that don't have any bosses, and they do very, very well. I also discovered there are two critical numbers if you put this structure in place. The first critical number is 10 to 12. And the ideal size of a team is going to be somewhere around 10 to 12 people. I think Jeff Bezos calls it the two pizza rule, that the team should be large enough that they could be fed by two pizzas. All right.
Yes.
And he's tapping into that. And the other number is 150. Bill Gore, who founded the company that they're the makers of Gore-Tex, have from their birth in 1958 used this peer-to-peer network model. They've never had a boss in almost 70 years. And they're an 11, I think a 10 or 11,000 person company in 30 countries around the world, and nobody has the authority to assign work to anybody else. When he put this in place, it worked very fine until they grew to about 200 people. And then he noticed things were breaking down. And he didn't want to go to a hierarchy. And you begin to understand why hierarchies go in place when you hit around 200 people. And so what he did is he divided his company into 2 units of 100 each.
Okay.
What he discovered is this ability to work in this team structure begins to break down after about 150 people. And so Gore is a collection of autonomous units of 150 people each. And they have teams of teams, if you will, as I understand it, that different people from these different units can get together and they cross-fertilize and cross-pollinate. But it's a very different set of practices, a very different set of tools, and it is a system. It is not a free-for-all. It's just a system in which there aren't bosses, but there are an awful lot of facilitators. So in middle management, we've got all these bosses who wind up being log jams many times. Whereas in the network, the role of quote, unquote, middle management is played by facilitators. And the facilitators can't make decisions for teams, but they help the team and they can put pressure on the team and bring tools to them so that they can get past whatever log jams they may be facing.
So why is 200 the number where this doesn't work and it has to be divided?
Well, it's actually
150. 150, okay.
And it's funny, Bill Gore discovered this in the 1960s, thereabouts. There was a sociologist by the name of Robin Dunbar, who in the 1970s looked at different types of mammals and came up with what's the maximum number for them to have cohesive societies. And for humans, he found that number to be 150. And Dunbar's number is, what's the maximum number of individuals that can be in my community or group, and I can know their names and know whether or not they are friendly or hostile. And so for human beings, it's about 150 people. Once you get beyond that, you don't know everybody's name, and you don't know you don't know whether you like them or not. I mean, there are corporations and buildings where people on the 38th floor never met anybody on the 16th floor, and they've been there for 20 years.
Oh, yes. They're in a different department.
Yeah. And so that's, and you don't have departments per se in network structures. You work in cross-functional teams to the fullest extent possible. There may be some staff departments that are necessary, but in terms of the operations of a company, you want to be very cross-functional.
And so what it does, it takes the ego out of the equation, doesn't it?
Ego as we know it, it takes the narcissistic egos out of the equation, but it puts in place what I would call the synergistic egos. And this is, I win by us, all of us winning. And so in networks naturally think win-win. And when they're working in teams, that's the way they're doing. And, when I would lead these collective intelligence workshops, instead of hearing, no, that's a dumb idea. Oh, no, that's crazy. We shouldn't do that. I was beginning to hear, that idea there, let's build on it and bring this in. And there was a lot of language around, let's take that and how can we build on it? And this is an example of power with, it's an example of win-win thinking. So much of the thinking in traditional organizations is about exercising control and coercion. It's about how I can get ahead of others, how I can withhold information so I look better than the other person does. None of this works to the advantage of the company.
No.
None of that makes sense in a network because the only way we win is by working together. So you've structured it that way. We have to think win-win. It's just
It's
not
so
enough.
logical, and it's so logical. It's crazy to think that there's companies that are still operating at a top-down. And with the evolution of everything, it seems to be speeding up here. And as you said, like it used to be you could stay in your company that way for 30 years and nothing else would happen. But now you better be on the ball because in 7 years, what you have created might be obsolete. And so now you have to keep on. The demand of the human race is at a much higher level.
And if I could add one last reason why networks are superior to hierarchies. Networks are better designed for handling complex problems.
Yes.
Top-down hierarchies were designed to handle complicated problems. You see, the previous age was the industrial age, which was all about machines. And corporations came about as we were scaling machines. And as a matter of fact, the corporation, if you look at an organization chart, it's a mechanical chart. And we treat human organizations as if they're machines and with these different parts that somebody at top can put together. One of the things that's happened with our new digital age is all our problems are complex, which means you can't distribute out to different people, different elements. I told you before in the collective intelligence workshop, people would say, let's build on this, let's build on this, let's do this. And in the course of doing that, we were holistically solving complex problems, and we were doing it smarter and faster because we were incorporating the complexity into the construction of the solution. Most business problems now have got to be solved holistically. They can't be solved through the traditional idea of division of labor.
And so employers are happier. And so employees don't want to stay home. They want to go to work because they're involved in a project. They feel an important person in that project. And so I interviewed a lady from Germany who was doing that type of experiment in a company. And she found that the sick days went down. People weren't taking their sick days. They wanted to be at the office. They wanted to be part of the team. And so instead of going to work where there's 100 or 200 people that you don't really want to work with because you're unhappy, you now want to go to work because you're in a team for the betterment of the product, whatever it may be. And so do they find that the emotional intelligence comes about because people are freer, they're not afraid anymore to voice their opinion, and in that way their creativity is honored, welcomed, and expanded upon?
You've hit upon the prime motivation at work. There's this argument, what matters more, recognition or money? It turns out, no. What most people are motivated by is I work with a group of people where we all know what the hell we're doing. And that is the greatest motivator. All right? Yes. That is more important than money, more important than recognition. I mean, I saw people turn down job offers for more money, higher positions in other companies, but they stayed with us while we're doing this because this matters. This matters.
And they mattered.
Yes. Yes,
And
they mattered. They
mattered.
felt, they felt, but there's nothing greater. I mean, you look at a team that's succeeding, okay? And what are they, by working together, their synergy, all of them know what the hell they're doing together. And they've created that synergistic power that allows them to rise above.
And they don't want to let their team members down. I mean, it's just like any sports, really. Any competitive sport where you think about pairs and figure skating or synchronized swimming where there's a team of 8. If they're not feeling well, they still go to training. I'm not saying having, the flu like the pandemic or anything like that, but the team is cohesive and they move together and they know the importance of their role, and they will show up a little bit unwell, maybe a headache or something like that, because the team is depending on them and relying on them. It makes them feel important. It makes their commitment higher. And then you just expand that out to a corporation.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, it's just fabulous. I love it. I love what you're talking about here. You're listening to Courting Your Soul with Rhonda Grant. And today I am speaking with Rod Collins. And Rod is going to let you know how you may reach out to him.
So the easiest way, I have a website. It's rodcollins.net, rodcollins.net. And if people go there, they can get access to my books. I have a Substack column, and but my contact information is there.
Mm-hmm. And is your book on Amazon or any of those
The book
places?
is on Amazon. It's available in hardback, paperback, and Kindle, and probably in a couple of months it'll be available as an audiobook as well. Yeah.
As an audiobook, yeah. I love that. I have a big audiobook library. And with my busy schedule and a lot of people's busy schedule, and we're driving quite a bit, it's wonderful to get a chapter in on the way to work.
Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, I just made that decision literally this afternoon to go audio.
Yeah,
It's
yes.
probably in about 45 days or so it'll be up. So
Wonderful. That's excellent. And a word for my sponsor. This podcast is created with digital audio health by my sponsor, Simatrex. Do you feel, there's a real pull for this? Do you feel called to the work that you've done? I mean, you're like a pioneer when it comes to this type. You signed up for this a long time ago, even before it was. I mean, you were one of the people that built this type of system. And so do you feel called to the journey that you're doing right now?
that's interesting you put it that. Yes, I've been this way all my life. And if we have a few minutes, I'll
Yes.
have one last story to tell.
Oh,
Okay.
I'd love it. Yeah, let's do it.
This all started when I was a junior in college. It's the most memorable course I took. It was a course in social psychology.
Uh-huh.
And when I showed up the first day of class, there were 200 people in the room. And the professor stunned me when he said, first thing he says is, "This is the last class you will be required to attend." He said, I'll be coming to class every week, but the two tests, midterm and final, will be based upon the textbooks. So if you want to self-study the textbooks, you'll be able to do well on the test." And he said, that'll be 50% of your grade. But then he said this, he said, the other 50% is you will be required to participate in a simulated society on a weekend in October. It will be mandatory. Since it's 50% of your grade, if you don't show up, you will fail the course. And then he said, if you have a wedding to go to on that weekend, drop the course because there'll be no exceptions. All right. And I thought
Yeah,
he's very clear.
fantastic.
And so that weekend in October came, and beforehand, we had to fill out a questionnaire. And there's one question that stood out for me because I pondered it for quite some time. And that was, what motivates you most? Affiliation, achievement, or power? And I knew the more politically correct answers were achievement or affiliation, but I knew what motivated me was power. And so I decided I'm going to check the box.
Mhm.
Well, on the day that we showed up for the simulated society, I was assigned the role of the Chief Justice of the Society Supreme Court. And I figured checking off power probably had something to do with that. And so they explained how the society would work. And a basic structure was we would be in 4 rooms, and no more than 50% of the society could be in any one room at one time. Different people had different freedom of movement. Some could move very freely, others could not, and required coupons and tickets to do so. We had an economy. Our results were going to be measured at several times over the course of the 2 days. And as the society began to unfold, I was stunned to see the number of people who really got caught up in gathering as much as they could for themselves at the expense of others.
Oh,
And I also discovered early on that the president of the society and I had similar orientations. We would support the growth of anyone and the expansion of anyone as long as it wasn't at the expense of others. And so he led, and the Supreme Court ruled accordingly. And the numbers of the society, as we went through this weekend, were pretty positive. And we got to the second day, it's probably early in the afternoon, when one of the people came up with a proposal. You know, our society's doing so well. Why don't we just have a party? You know, these 4 rooms are really just 2 rooms. They're rooms on each side of a hall, but there's a portable partition in each of these 2 rooms that's dividing into 4. Let's get all the people 50% into one side, 50% into the other. We'll roll back the partition. We'll have a big party. So the Supreme Court ruled it could be done. And the mentors who are there said, you can't do that. And I remember saying, show me in the rules where we can't make this decision.
mhm.
And they said, we can't, but we delay a decision for 20 minutes. So we get the professor over, who's over with the other group. By the way, when we showed up, we were actually 2 groups. The class was 200, but we were 2 groups of 100. Okay.
Mhm,
So I guess they were aware of Dunbar's number as well. But anyway, the professor comes over and he announces immediately, you will have your party after we have a 30-minute debrief. Because congratulations, you have done what less than 5% of the simulated societies do. And that is you have created a functioning, workable society. And that struck with me, as long as our organizations are designed around the principle, let everyone advance and in their self-interest as much as they can, that's fine, but not at the expense of others within their community.
Wow.
If that's the guiding principle of organizations, it's a classic example of what Stephen Covey called win-win thinking.
Mhm.
And that experience stayed with me all my life, and it influenced how I behaved when I got into managerial roles.
Well, it sounds like it was the springboard for you.
Yeah.
And because it set your course basically for your whole life, wherever you worked, you were making changes as soon as you knew that you could in corporations. And I think it's just wonderful.
And it worked. I mean, I
And it
kept getting
worked.
promoted. Some of my colleagues I was known as the weird one. But
They're the best ones.
but it was delivering results, and quite
Mhm.
frankly, we had the most successful business unit in the larger organization. And so,
Fantastic.
one of the things about this model is it works more reliably than the top-down hierarchical model.
Oh, yes. Yes. What extraordinary discovery have you found in your life?
Well, I think it's happening now. And
Yes.
that is this whole issue of top-down hierarchy versus peer-to-peer network is not just about organizations or corporations anymore.
Mhm.
In this new digital age, it's going to be about how we organize societies. We are
Yes.
rapidly moving into a world where artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, will know everything about everyone. And if this digital technology and if artificial intelligence is built in the structures of top-down hierarchies, we are likely to see the most totalitarian societies the world has ever known. And George L. Orwell will have been prescient in his book 1984. However, if we use AI and all this technology and structure it in the context of a peer-to-peer network, I believe we have the opportunity to actually evolve and advance human civilization. And we're seeing some technological tools that are aligned with this, most specifically blockchain. And blockchain takes out the intermediaries, if you will, the middle management, and lets the individuals self-manage themselves. So it's probably the most, we're all worried about AI and is it going to take us over? We don't have to worry about AI.
No.
We have to worry about the humans.
Yes.
How will humans build AI? If we build the top-down totalitarian structures, then this will be the fear that everyone has. But
Mhm.
it won't be AI acting independently. It will be the way the humans have structured the AI. And on the other hand, if we build it as a peer-to-peer network, if we value diversity of opinion and build structures that value collective intelligence, then we are likely to evolve humanity to a higher level of intelligence than we've ever seen. And I'm actually hopeful that that's the way we're going. For the
Mhm.
simple reason, as I mentioned before, top-down hierarchies can't innovate. Peer-to-peer networks do it naturally. And I think
Yes.
at the end of the day, the innovators will win. And but I think we could go through some very rough and very difficult times. And I think we have started to go through them, because
Mhm.
whoever thought we would see the level of censorship, categories like misinformation, disinformation. These are all the tools of people who want to build top-down hierarchies and drive uniformity of thought.
Mhm.
Misinformation is nothing more than information I don't agree with. And so we need to listen to information we don't agree with, because all of us working together will parcel through it. And we saw a perfect example. This COVID experience we went through showed us the worst of top-down hierarchical management, because we shut down important voices. If we had a peer-to-peer network, and if we had blended the collective intelligence, we would have come through the COVID experience much more positively than we have.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's COVID is a cautionary tale as
Mhm.
we approach the building of AI. And we may look back and be thankful we went through it, because there may be lessons learned out of it, that having learned those, we will approach the building of AI very differently than the way we managed COVID.
Mhm. Wonderful. You have so much knowledge. I mean, I'm sure we could talk for another hour, because you have incredible knowledge. You're so interesting to listen to. And so thank you so much for coming back to the Rhonda Grant Show. And it's a pleasure seeing you again, Rod.
Oh, it's great being with you again. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you for listening to Courting Your Soul with Rhonda Grant, whose podcast has been treated with digital audio health by my sponsor, Simatrack. Theme song for Courting Your Soul is Sun on the Water, composed and performed by John Park Wheeler.